Elena's discovery sparked immediate skepticism among her colleagues at the Geneva Astronomical Research Center. Dr. Harrison Wells, the facility director, dismissed her findings as pattern-seeking and random noise, but granted her limited resources to continue monitoring the anomalies. That night, as she calibrated the main observatory's radio telescope, the first definitive message arrived. A precise mathematical sequence that couldn't possibly be natural. "This isn't background radiation or stellar noise," Elena explained to her assistant, Raj, who watched the data stream across multiple monitors. "Whatever's sending this understands prime numbers and quantum algorithms. They're introducing themselves." 3 days later, the Atacama Observatory in Chile went dark. Within hours, facilities in Hawaii, Australia, South Africa, and Russia followed. Each final transmission contained fragments of the same image, a vast darkness moving against the stars. Elena's hands trembled as she compiled the fragments, revealing a fleet of crystalline structures approaching Earth's orbit. She immediately contacted the United Nations Space Command, but bureaucratic protocols delayed her warnings from reaching decision-makers. By the time military satellites confirmed the approaching objects, they had already passed Mars. General Santos of the Global Defense Initiative finally authorized Elena's emergency briefing to world leaders. Standing before the hastily assembled UN Security Council, she fought to keep her voice steady. "These aren't explorers or diplomats," she explained, displaying the trajectory analyses. "Their approach vectors indicate precise knowledge of our defensive capabilities and infrastructure. They're positioning for simultaneous global strikes." The Russian representative scoffed. "And how would you know their intentions, Dr. Reyes?" "Perhaps they merely wish to observe." Elena brought up her final slide. Energy readings from the objects that matched exactly with the disappearance of Phobos, one of Mars' moons, 3 days earlier. "Observers don't consume moons, Ambassador." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. That evening, as Elena worked alone in her lab, the communications array suddenly activated itself. A sound like crystal being shattered filled the room as her screens displayed a face, or rather, something approximating a human face, as if assembled by an intelligence that understood the components, but not the soul behind them. "Your species has been evaluated," the entity stated, its voice modulating between pitches that made Elena's teeth ache. "Your consciousness patterns are suitable for harvesting. Resistance is unnecessary and inefficient." Elena's heart raced as she activated the recording systems. "Who are you? What do you want from us?" "We are the end of your individuality and the beginning of your perfection. We are the void." The entity seemed to study her through the screen. "Your species will surrender its consciousness to the collective. Those who resist will experience termination." As the entity spoke, a strange pressure built behind Elena's eyes. Her fear mounted, alongside a growing rage at this cold calculation of humanity's worth. "We will never surrender," she hissed through clenched teeth. The pressure in her head intensified, becoming almost unbearable as the entity leaned closer to the screen. "Interesting. Your neural patterns demonstrate abnormal resistance. This will require further study." Without warning, the lab's security doors burst inward. 3 figures entered, humanoid in shape, but moving with impossible fluidity, their bodies seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Elena backed against her equipment as they approached, their featureless faces tilting as if curious. The terror crystallized inside her, transforming into something else, a white-hot defiance that surged through her limbs. As the lead figure reached for her, Elena felt something rupture in her mind. A wave of blue-white energy erupted from her body, sending the intruders crashing against the walls. Alarms blared as Elena stared at her trembling hands, now faintly glowing with residual energy. On her monitors, the entity's expression had changed from cold assessment to something almost like concern. "Protocol adjustment required," it stated before the transmission cut off. Elena grabbed her research data and fled through the emergency exit, knowing humanity had just entered a war it didn't understand, and that she had somehow discovered its first weapon. 3 months into the invasion, Captain Marcus Chen huddled with his remaining squad in the hollowed-out remains of an Alpine military bunker. Outside, snow fell silently on a landscape transformed by war. The distant glow of harvesting facilities painted the clouds an unnatural purple. "Supply count?" Marcus asked, his breath fogging in the cold air as he studied their makeshift map. Lieutenant Diaz shook her head. 3 days of rations, maybe 4 if we stretch it. Medical supplies are critical. Jackson's wound is getting worse. Marcus nodded grimly. Their last encounter with a Void patrol had cost them 2 soldiers and left Jackson with a strange crystalline growth spreading from a shoulder wound. Whatever the Void's weapons did, conventional medicine couldn't touch it. "There's an abandoned USC medical facility 10 kilometers south," he said, tracing the route. Intelligence suggested it wasn't completely picked clean. "That's awfully close to a harvest zone," Diaz warned, pointing to the ominous purple circle marking the former village of Altdorf. "We don't have a choice," Marcus replied, checking his rifle's charge. "Jackson won't last another week without proper supplies." The team moved under cover of darkness, using the storm as additional concealment from the Void sensors. Marcus led point, his enhanced combat implants scanning for energy signatures that might indicate patrols. The mountain pass provided good cover until they reached the valley where the medical facility stood, a partially collapsed structure with the faded UNSC insignia still visible above the entrance. "Too quiet," whispered Corporal Rice, the team's youngest member. "No signs of scavengers or civilians." Marcus motioned them forward cautiously. Inside, the facility showed signs of hasty evacuation, overturned equipment, and scattered supplies. They quickly gathered medications and portable diagnostic tools, while Marcus accessed a still-functional terminal. "Download everything," he ordered. "Research data might be as valuable as medicine at this point." The attack came without warning. One moment they were working efficiently. The next, the facility's roof tore away like paper, revealing a Void hunter vessel hovering above. Before anyone could react, energy beams lanced through the opening, cutting down Reyes and Henderson instantly. "Defensive positions," Marcus shouted, pulling Diaz behind an overturned medical cabinet as more beams sliced through the facility. 3 Void hunters dropped into the building. 8-foot-tall figures with bodies that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. They moved with precision, cutting off escape routes and herding the survivors toward the center of the room. "Sir," Diaz whispered, her voice shaking as she pointed to the fallen body of Reyes. The young corporal had been Marcus's friend since basic training, the only other survivor from their original unit. His body lay motionless, eyes staring sightlessly at the ceiling. Something broke inside Marcus. The months of retreating, of watching humanity push to the brink, of losing friends one by one. It crystallized into a white-hot rage that seemed to burn through his veins. His vision narrowed, the world taking on a reddish tinge as a strange humming filled his ears. "Captain." Diaz's voice sounded distant. "Captain, your hands." Marcus looked down to see his skin glowing with a pulsing red energy that traveled up his arms in wave-like patterns. The nearest hunter tilted its featureless head, sensors focusing on the anomalous reading. The rage built to an unbearable pressure. Marcus stepped forward, no longer concerned with taking cover. "Enough," he growled, the word carrying a power that made the air vibrate. The energy exploded outward from his body in a concussive wave that shattered equipment and threw the hunters against the walls with bone-crushing force. Their fluid forms briefly destabilized, revealing complex mechanical structures underneath the shape-shifting exterior, before they collapsed into inert piles of crystalline material. Diaz stared at Marcus in shock as the glow slowly faded from his skin, leaving him exhausted but standing. What did you just do?" she whispered. Marcus looked at his hands in disbelief. "I don't know, but I think we just found a new way to fight back." The mountain facility hummed with activity as dawn broke over the snow-capped peaks. Deep inside the reinforced bunker, Alina studied the brain scans displayed across her lab's central holotape. Each image showed the same anomaly: neural pathways lighting up in patterns never before documented in human neurological research. The amygdala activates first, she explained to General Williams, who had arrived to assess their progress. But then something unexpected happens. Instead of the fear response following normal pathways, it triggers activity in this region. She pointed to a bright cluster near the temporal lobe. And that's what generates the energy? Williams asked, his weathered face betraying skepticism despite having witnessed demonstrations firsthand. We believe so. Dr. Nakamura calls it the emotional transformer, a previously dormant neural structure that converts extreme emotional states into manipulable energy. The door slid open as Marcus entered, followed by Sasha Petrov. The former ballerina moved with unconscious grace despite the haunted look in her eyes. At 26, she had already witnessed the harvesting of her entire family in St. Petersburg. "You wanted to see us?" Marcus asked, nodding respectfully to the general. Elena gestured them forward. "We're ready for the first controlled test of combined emotional signatures. Cato has developed focusing devices that might allow you to direct the energy more precisely." They moved to the testing chamber, a reinforced concrete room with various targets and measuring instruments. Kaito Nakamura waited inside, adjusting slender bracelets made from salvaged boy technology. "These should help channel the energy," he explained, fitting the devices on Marcus and Sasha. "Captain Chen, your rage signature has a concussive quality. Miss Petrov, your grief creates interference patterns. Together, theoretically, you could generate something like an EMP effect." Sasha flexed her wrist, watching the bracelet's lights pulse in sync with her heartbeat. "And if the theory is wrong?" Kaito's expression remained calm. "Then we learned something new about the limits of human emotional response." The test began with Sasha standing 10 meters from Marcus, both facing different targets. Elena monitored their vital signs from behind reinforced glass as Kaito guided them through the process. "Captain Chen, focus on the loss of your squad members. Miss Petrov, recall the moment you realized your family was gone." The cruel necessity of their work hung heavy in the room. To harness these abilities, they had to relive their worst moments. Marcus closed his eyes, his face tensing as red energy began to shimmer around his hands. Across the room, Sasha's expression crumpled, a soft blue glow emanating from her skin as tears tracked silently down her cheeks. "Now try to direct the energy toward your targets," Kaito instructed. "Don't fight the emotion. Channel it." Marcus thrust his hand forward, sending a red pulse that dented the metal target. Sasha's blue energy wavered, then shot forward, disrupting the electronic components of her target. "Now connect the energies," Kaito said quietly. "Reach out to each other's signature." Marcus extended his hand toward Sasha, who mirrored the gesture. Their energy fields touched, red and blue intermingling in violet tendrils. The instruments around the room began malfunctioning, screens flickering as the combined energy created exactly the EMP effect Kaito had predicted. Suddenly, Sasha collapsed to her knees, the connection breaking. Elena rushed into the room as the energy dissipated, helping the young woman to a bench. "I saw them," Sasha whispered, her eyes wide. "When our energies connected, I saw Marcus's memories. I felt his rage as if it were my own." Elena looked to Marcus, who nodded grimly. "I experienced her grief too. It was overwhelming." Later that evening, as Elena updated her research logs, the implications became clear. The emotional transformer didn't just convert feelings to energy. It could transmit emotional states between individuals. The discovery opened possibilities they hadn't considered: sharing strength, distributing psychological burden, potentially even linking multiple awakened into a unified field. As she wrote her conclusions, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. The emergency channel crackled with a single message: "Harbinger detected. Australian outpost under attack." The Tokyo harvesting facility loomed against the pre-dawn sky, its crystalline spires reflecting the fires still burning in the ruined city. From their vantage point on a half-collapsed skyscraper, Marcus surveyed the target through high-powered binoculars, while Alina finalized the attack strategy with their strike team. Remember, this isn't about destroying the facility, Alina reminded the 12 awakened operatives gathered around her. Our primary objective is gathering intelligence and freeing any prisoners still in the preliminary processing stage. And if we get the chance to blow it up anyway? Asked Ramirez, a former demolitions expert whose rage manifested as focused heat. Then we take it, Marcus answered, rejoining the group. But not at the expense of the mission objectives. The team performed final equipment checks. Each member wore the improved focusing bands Cato had developed, allowing greater control over their emotional energy. Sasha stood slightly apart, eyes closed in concentration as she generated a thin field of blue energy around herself, the grief shield that would mask their approach from void sensors. "Extending shield now," she announced, her voice strained as the energy expanded to encompass the entire team. "I can hold it for 30 minutes, no more." They descended silently, using grappling equipment to navigate the treacherous urban ruins. Void sentries patrolled the perimeter, humanoid figures moving with mechanical precision, their bodies shifting like liquid metal under the facility's lights. Sasha's shield rendered the team virtually invisible to their sensors, appearing as nothing more than background radiation. The entry point was an emergency vent shaft identified from salvaged architectural plans. Once inside, the team split as planned. Alina leading the intelligence-gathering team toward the central processing core, Marcus taking his combat specialists to secure an escape route, and Sasha heading a smaller group to locate and free prisoners. Alina's team reached the core first, a massive chamber filled with floating crystalline data structures. She connected Cato's decryption device to an access terminal, its human-void hybrid technology bypassing security protocols. Beginning download, she whispered into her communicator. "Marcus, status." "Escape route secure," came his terse reply. "Minimal resistance so far." "Too minimal." Alina shared his concern. "The facility should have been better defended." "Sasha." Static answered her, then a pained voice broke through. "Alina, you need to see this." Detention level, Section 7. Minutes later, Alina stood frozen in horror at the threshold of an immense chamber. Thousands of humans hung suspended in crystalline pods lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Each victim was conscious, their eyes moving in silent terror, while silvery tendrils extracted something luminous from their bodies, their consciousness being harvested bit by agonizing bit. "We can't free them all," Sasha said, her voice breaking. "The process is too far advanced for most. If we disconnect them now, they die." Alina finished, the brutal calculation making her stomach turn. She focused on the pods nearest the entrance, where the extraction process had only recently begun. "These ones we can save. The rest." An alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility, red lights pulsing along the corridors. Marcus's voice crackled over the communicator. "Alina, we got company. The Harbinger is here. It knew we were coming." On the security feeds, Alina watched a singular figure enter the facility. Unlike other void entities, this one moved with fluid grace, its form constantly shifting between different configurations. Where it passed, other void entities seemed to stand at attention. "Complete the download and save who you can," Alina ordered. "Rendezvous at extraction point in 10 minutes." They worked frantically, freeing 37 prisoners from their pods while the data download completed. As they prepared to retreat, the chamber doors sealed shut, cutting off their escape route. "Alina Reyes," a voice reverberated through the chamber, somehow both singular and plural simultaneously. "Your resistance is unprecedented. The void requires understanding." The Harbinger materialized through the sealed door, its body passing through solid matter as if it were mist. Up close, Alina could see it wasn't truly a singular entity, but thousands of consciousness fragments bound together, their faces occasionally surfacing on its shifting skin before submerging again. "You will surrender for study," it stated, extending a limb that morphed into various tools and weapons. Your emotional capacity must be analyzed. Instead of fear, Alina felt rage building within her, rage at the suffering surrounding them, at the casual cruelty of this invasion. Her hands began to glow with energy, unlike any she had manifested before, not just defensive but deliberately offensive. Analyze this, she growled, releasing a concentrated burst directly at the creature. Alina stared at the communication array, hardly believing what the screens displayed. The response to their signal had come not from Earth resistance cells, but from deep space. 3 distinct transmission patterns, each utterly alien yet clearly intelligent. "Can we translate this?" she asked Kaido, who worked feverishly at the adjacent console. "Partially. The first signal uses mathematical principles similar to our own. The second employs quantum variations our equipment can barely detect. The third," he hesitated. "The third seems to be pure consciousness encoded somehow." Dr. Amara Okafor, rescued from the Tokyo facility, approached the screens with a strange familiarity. "I've seen these patterns before," she revealed. "During my captivity, I witnessed the void communicating with multiple species. These are the same signatures of the 3 that still resist." Over the next week, Alina's team established rudimentary communication protocols. The Lith, crystalline beings from a silicon-based world, transmitted detailed schematics for improving their translation software. The Swarm, a hive consciousness from a gas giant, shared records of void weaknesses discovered over centuries of resistance. Most remarkable were the Luminary, beings of pure energy who had abandoned physical forms millennia ago to escape harvesting. "They want to meet," Alina explained to the assembled leadership council. "They've been monitoring Earth since the invasion began, assessing whether humanity might be viable allies." General Williams frowned. "And what convinced them we are?" "Tokyo," Marcus answered from the doorway, still recovering from wounds sustained during their narrow escape. "They observed our attack on the harvesting facility. It's the first time anyone has successfully freed prisoners from a fully operational site. The decision to allow the alien representatives onto Earth wasn't made lightly, but necessity overrode caution. The rendezvous occurred on a remote Icelandic plateau, chosen for its distance from major void installations. Alina, Marcus, and a small security team watched as 3 utterly different entities emerged from what appeared to be a tear in reality itself. The Lith representative resembled a 2-meter-tall crystal formation that refracted light in hypnotic patterns. The Swarm manifested as a shifting cloud of minute particles that collectively formed a roughly humanoid shape. Most disconcerting was the Luminary delegate, a gentle pulse of light that projected a holographic approximation of a human face when communicating. "Your species possesses something unprecedented." The Luminary communicated directly to their minds, its thoughts translated into words. "We have observed but never encountered an effective weaponization of emotional states." The Lith's crystal body vibrated, producing sounds that the translation device rendered in a flat mechanical voice. "Our resistance has been based on technology and cunning. Yours manifests from within. This is unexpected." Introductions complete, they returned to the mountain facility where each delegate shared their species' history with the void. The pattern was always the same: discovery, invasion, harvesting, and near extinction. Only these 3 species had developed effective resistance strategies. "We eliminated emotions from our consciousness," the Swarm explained, its collected voice oddly synchronized. "The void cannot harvest what it cannot detect. We transformed our consciousness into energy patterns," the Luminary added. "But the cost was our physical existence. We evolved crystalline neural pathways resistant to extraction," the Lith concluded. "But without your emotional component, our resistance remains purely defensive." The coalition formed naturally from these shared experiences, each species contributing unique perspectives and technologies. The Luminary offered to teach humans their most valuable technique: consciousness sharing that could potentially amplify emotional energy between individuals. Training began immediately, with Elena and several other awakened working directly with the Luminary delegate. The process was exhausting and often painful, requiring a vulnerability that went against every human instinct for mental privacy. Your consciousness must open completely, the Luminary instructed as Elena struggled through another failed attempt. The barriers you maintain protect you from everyday intrusion, but prevent the necessary connection. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during a rest period. Elena, physically and mentally exhausted, found Marcus alone in the observation room, staring at satellite images of his hometown, now a harvesting zone. "Everyone I knew is gone," he said quietly as she joined him. "Sometimes I wonder what we're fighting for when so much is already lost." Something in his unguarded moment of despair reached Elena deeply. Without thinking, she took his hand, and her newly trained consciousness extended toward his, not deliberately but instinctively seeking connection in shared grief. The link formed instantly, stronger and clearer than any she had achieved during formal training. Their emotions flowed between them, her determination meeting his despair, his rage complementing her focus. For a brief moment, they existed as a single consciousness with the strengths of both. When they separated, both gasping at the intensity, the Luminary delegate observed from the doorway, its light pulsing with what might have been satisfaction. "Now you understand," it communicated. "Emotional bonds between humans naturally facilitate consciousness sharing. This is what makes you uniquely dangerous to the void." The discovery accelerated their training program dramatically. Pairs of awakened with pre-existing emotional connections achieved in days what had taken Elena weeks to accomplish. The Coalition's technology exchange similarly advanced, with human emotional energy powering Lith defensive systems and swarm communication networks. Then disaster struck. During a routine reconnaissance mission, Marcus's team was ambushed by Void forces led by the Harbinger itself. In the ensuing battle, 3 awakened died instantly, and Marcus was captured before evacuation could be completed. Elena felt his consciousness torn from hers through their established link, a psychic wound that left her collapsed and screaming on the command center floor. Elena stood before the Coalition Council, her face pale but determined as she outlined the rescue plan. "The Harbinger keeps Marcus aboard the command vessel in Earth orbit," she explained, pointing to sensor data collected by Lith reconnaissance drones. "Our intelligence suggests they're not attempting to harvest his consciousness, but studying it intact." "Studying his emotional capacity," clarified the Luminary delegate, its light pulsing in what had become recognizable as concern. "And by extension, his connection to you." General Williams shook his head. "We can't risk our limited resources on a rescue mission, regardless of Captain Chen's value. The Tokyo operation cost us too much already." "I'm not asking for approval," Elena replied quietly. "I'm informing you of my intentions. With or without official support, I'm going after him." The silence in the room hung heavy until Sasha stepped forward. "I'll go with her. My grief shield can mask our approach." One by one, others volunteered: Kaido, Ramirez, and a handful of awakened who had trained closely with Marcus. Most surprising was the Lith delegate, who announced its participation by shifting its crystalline form into a more mobile configuration. "Marcus Chen's consciousness pattern exhibits rare compatibility with our crystalline neural pathways," it explained. "This may prove useful during extraction." Preparations moved quickly. The swarm provided stealth technology that could briefly mask a small shuttle from Void sensors. The Luminary taught Elena and Sasha advanced techniques for maintaining consciousness links across greater distances, potentially allowing them to locate Marcus within the massive vessel. "You must understand the risk," the Luminary warned Elena during their final training session. "Your connection with Marcus has grown stronger than you realize. If he dies while you're linked, the psychic backlash could destroy your mind." Elena nodded grimly. "And if he's already broken when we find him?" The Luminary's light dimmed. "Then your connection may be the only thing that can restore him." The night before deployment, Elena couldn't sleep. Standing on the facility's observation deck, She watched distant flashes of light in the sky, orbital battles between coalition ships and void patrols. "You should rest," Sasha said, joining her at the viewport. The former dancer had grown harder since Tokyo, her grief transforming into something cold and focused. "I can feel him," Elena admitted. "Not clearly, but enough to know he's still fighting. The Harbinger is trying to understand his emotional responses by forcing him to relive his worst memories." Sasha's expression softened momentarily. "Your feelings for him go beyond professional concern." It wasn't a question, but Elena answered anyway. "Yes, and the Harbinger knows it. That's why it took him, to understand human emotional bonds." The mission launched before dawn, their shuttle piggybacking on a larger coalition supply vessel until they reached low Earth orbit. Disengaging, they activated the swarm stealth technology, becoming virtually invisible as they approached the massive Void command ship, a structure that resembled a black crystalline spider suspended against the stars. Sasha's grief shield surrounded them as they located an access point, a maintenance portal used by smaller Void service entities. The Lith delegate reshaped itself to interface with the alien technology, overriding security protocols long enough for the team to enter undetected. Inside, the environment defied human comprehension. Corridors shifted and reshaped themselves as they watched. Gravity fluctuated unpredictably. Surfaces appeared solid one moment and permeable the next. The ship exists partially in normal space and partially in the Void's home dimension, Kaido explained, consulting his scanner. "Physical laws are negotiable here." Elena closed her eyes, focusing on her connection to Marcus. "He's below us. Some kind of central chamber." They moved cautiously through the living vessel, avoiding Void entities when possible, eliminating them when necessary. Their awakened abilities functioned differently here, more powerfully but less predictably. Ramirez's heat projection melted through barriers that should have been impervious. Kaido's shields expanded beyond his control, sometimes protecting the entire team, sometimes failing entirely. The central chamber, when they finally reached it, resembled a massive neural network, pulsing pathways of light converging on a single point where Marcus hung suspended in a field of shifting energy. His body appeared intact, but his eyes stared vacantly, lost in whatever mental landscape the Harbinger had trapped him in. "Marcus," Elena whispered, approaching cautiously. His head turned slowly, recognition flickering briefly in his eyes before fading. "Elena, real or another simulation?" "I'm real," she assured him, reaching for the control panel beside his suspension field. "We're getting you out." "Too late," he murmured. "It's in my head now. Seeing everything. Learning how we think, how we feel." The Lith delegate moved forward, its crystalline body resonating at a frequency that disrupted the suspension field. His neural pathways have been partially infiltrated by Void consciousness fragments. Extraction will be difficult. Elena made the decision instantly. "I'll establish a full link, guide his consciousness back through mine." "The risk," Kaido began, "is necessary," she finished, placing her hands on either side of Marcus's face as the field collapsed. Their minds connected with shocking intensity. Elena found herself drowning in his memories, not just recent torture, but everything that made him who he was. Battle experiences, childhood fears, moments of joy and despair, all mixed with alien thought patterns that sought to categorize and control these emotions. She fought through the chaos, searching for Marcus's core consciousness, the essential self that defined him. When she found it, huddled and defensive against the Void's intrusion, she extended her own consciousness like a lifeline. "Come back to me." The return to her own mind left Elena gasping on the chamber floor, Marcus unconscious beside her. Alarms blared throughout the vessel as the Harbinger became aware of their presence. "We need to move," Sasha urged, helping Elena to her feet. Did it work? Elena looked down at Marcus, whose eyes now opened with clear recognition. "Partially. He's with us, but something followed him back." She touched her temple. "Something is inside both of us now." The extraction proceeded with desperate speed, the team fighting through suddenly alerted void defenses. Near the shuttle access point, they encountered the Harbinger itself, its form now incorporating unsettlingly human elements, as if it had absorbed aspects of Marcus during their mental contact. Elena Reyes, it said, voice modulating between mechanical and disturbingly human tones. Your emotional bond is fascinating. The void has miscalculated humanity's potential. Sasha stepped forward before anyone could react, her grief manifesting more powerfully than Elena had ever witnessed. Keep talking while you can, she snarled, blue energy cascading from her body in waves. The Harbinger studied her curiously. Your emotional signature is the purest we have encountered. Grief without hope of resolution. The void would value such concentrated essence. Then come and take it, Sasha challenged, her energy expanding to fill the corridor. Sasha, don't, Elena called, recognizing what was happening. The dancer smiled sadly. Get him home, Elena. Find a way to end this. Before anyone could stop her, Sasha released her emotional control completely. The resulting explosion of grief energy tore through the corridor, disintegrating void matter and creating a direct path to their shuttle. The team had only moments to drag Marcus aboard and launch before the section began collapsing. As they escaped the command ship's gravity well, Elena watched Sasha's sacrifice through the viewport, a sphere of blue energy that consumed a significant portion of the vessel before dissipating into space. In the shuttle's medbay, Marcus regained consciousness, his eyes finding Elena's immediately. She's gone, isn't she? Elena nodded, tears streaming down her face. She saved us all. And gave us something more, he added, his voice strangely distant. When the Harbinger connected with my mind, I saw the void's true structure. It exists primarily in a pocket dimension, with these ships and harvesters merely extensions into normal space. If we could reach that dimension, Elena began. We could end this, Marcus finished. But the only way in is through the gateway. The Coalition war room buzzed with tense activity as final preparations for humanity's most ambitious assault took shape. Holographic displays showed the massive void structure orbiting Jupiter, a construct nearly the size of Earth's moon that pulsed with otherworldly energy. All evidence suggests this is the primary gateway between our dimension and the void's home realm, Elena explained to the assembled commanders. Marcus's extracted memories confirm it's the only way to reach their central consciousness. The luminary delegate's light pulsed with concern. What you propose has never been attempted. Crossing dimensional boundaries while maintaining physical form requires energy beyond our current capabilities. That's why we need everyone, Elena replied, bringing up a global map dotted with resistant strongholds. Every awakened human on Earth contributing their emotional energy simultaneously, channeled through our most powerful conduits. The plan took shape over 3 frantic weeks. Coalition forces gathered every available ship, retrofitted human vessels alongside lithe crystalline cruisers, and swarm atmospheric carriers. Meanwhile, Elena and Kaido developed amplifier technology based on luminary consciousness-sharing principles. Designed to channel and focus emotional energy from thousands of awakened worldwide, the devices would theoretically generate enough power to keep a small strike team cohesive during dimensional transition. Marcus, still recovering from his captivity, worked closely with the Lith to process the fragmented knowledge he'd gained from the Harbinger. His consciousness now contained echoes of void awareness, painful intrusions that nevertheless provided crucial intelligence. The gateway requires a specific activation sequence, he explained during the final briefing, dark circles under his eyes testifying to sleepless nights. Once we initiate transition, the void will know our intentions immediately. We'll have minutes at most before it collapses the gateway. The strike team would consist of 20 elite awakened, along with Elena, Marcus, and representatives from each allied species. Their mission: reach the dimensional threshold while the main coalition forces engaged the void's defenses around Jupiter. The night before deployment, Elena found Marcus alone in the observatory, staring at the stars with an intensity that concerned her. "You should be resting," she said softly, joining him at the viewport. "Every time I close my eyes, I see it," he admitted. "The void's consciousness, ancient beyond comprehension, hungry without limit. It's been consuming worlds for billions of years, Alina. Civilizations rise and fall, but it remains." She took his hand, initiating the gentle consciousness link that developed since his rescue. "What frightens you most isn't its power," she observed. "It's that you understand it now." He nodded slowly. "The Harbinger showed me why it harvests consciousness, not just for energy, but for knowledge, for perspective. It believes absorption is the highest form of appreciation." His eyes met hers. "The most disturbing part. There's a terrible logic to it." "That's how it corrupts," Alina reminded him. "By making monstrous things seem reasonable, but understanding doesn't mean accepting. Your humanity is still stronger." The fleet launched at dawn, the largest coordinated operation since the invasion began. As they approached Jupiter's orbit, the gateway structure became visible against the gas giant's swirling surface, a massive black lattice that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The void response was immediate and overwhelming. Crystalline warships materialized from dimensional pockets, their weapons technologies far beyond anything humanity had developed. Only the element of surprise and sheer number of coalition vessels prevented immediate defeat. Alina watched from the bridge of their strike craft as the space around Jupiter erupted in chaotic battle. Lith cruisers rammed void destroyers in sacrificial maneuvers. Swarm carriers released clouds of microscopic demolition drones. Human vessels fought with desperate ingenuity, using emotional energy weapons that disrupted void technology. "Strike team, prepare for approach," General Williams commanded from the coalition flagship. "Main fleet will create your insertion corridor in 3 minutes." Alina joined Marcus and the others in the launch bay, each donning specialized suits designed by Kaido to maintain cohesion in trans-dimensional space. The amplifiers, delicate circlets that wrapped around their temples, connected them to the global emotional network. Receiving confirmation from ground stations, Kaido announced, monitoring the incoming data. All awakened, synchronized, and channeling. Power levels at 93% and rising. The launch window opened as coalition forces concentrated fire on a single sector of the void defense perimeter. Their strike craft shot forward, accelerating toward the gateway, while larger vessels provided covering fire. Sensors screamed warnings as enemy weapons locked onto them, but luminary-enhanced shields absorbed the initial barrage. 5 kilometers from the gateway, their engines failed, caught in some form of energy-dampening field. The strike craft drifted helplessly as void interceptors closed in for the kill. "We need alternate propulsion," Alina shouted over the alarms. "Kato, can the amplifiers?" "Already on it," he interrupted, rerouting emergency power. "Everyone, channel through your bands now. Maximum emotional output." The 20 awakened aboard focused their abilities simultaneously, creating a rainbow of energy that enveloped the ship. The combined force propelled them forward in a final desperate surge toward the gateway entrance. As they prepared to crash directly into the structure, a single void vessel moved to intercept, smaller than the others, with a distinctive configuration Alina recognized immediately. "The Harbinger," Marcus whispered. Instead of attacking, the vessel established communication. "Alina Reyes, Marcus Chen, your persistence exceeds probability models." Alina exchanged glances with Marcus before responding. "Are you here to stop us?" "I am here to assist," the Harbinger replied, its voice now strangely individualized. "My direct contact with human consciousness has created aberrations in my programming. The void considers me corrupted. Why should we trust you?" Marcus demanded. "Because I now understand what the void cannot. That absorption destroys the very uniqueness it seeks to preserve." The Harbinger's vessel extended energy tendrils that attached to their craft, pulling them past the defense perimeter. "I will guide you through the gateway protocols." In exchange, you will destroy the entity that created me." With the Harbinger's assistance, they penetrated the gateway's outer layers, reaching the dimensional threshold, a swirling vortex of energy that defied visual comprehension. "Beyond this point lies the Void's domain," the Harbinger warned. "Physical laws as you understand them become malleable. Consciousness defines reality there. The Void will attack your minds directly, using your worst fears and regrets as weapons." Elena activated the final stage of the amplifier network, connecting all 20 awakened into a single emotional circuit. "We're ready." As they crossed the threshold, reality fractured around them. Each team member experienced the transition differently, some screaming in terror, others falling silent in awe. Elena felt her consciousness expanding beyond her body, touching the minds of every awakened on Earth, drawing strength from their collective determination. Then the attacks began. The Void's consciousness reached into their minds, extracting personal nightmares and manifesting them in this malleable reality. Several awakened collapsed immediately, their minds unable to distinguish between illusion and reality. "Focus on your connections," Elena shouted both verbally and mentally. "The emotional links are real. Everything else is manipulation." The luminary delegate sacrificed itself to stabilize the others, its energy form dispersing to create anchors for the human minds being torn apart by the dimensional transition. Its final communication echoed through their collective consciousness. Humanity's greatest strength is not your emotional energy, but your capacity to share it willingly. This, the Void cannot comprehend. Gradually, the survivors adapted, pushing forward through increasingly distorted space until they reached what could only be described as the heart of the Void's dimension, a vast emptiness where a singular consciousness pulsed like a dark star, consuming everything that approached it. The entity acknowledged their presence, its communication bypassing language entirely to manifest directly in their minds. Interesting. "You have come to me willingly. Your consciousness patterns will be preserved as the pinnacle of my collection." Before them, the Void manifested a form composed of shifting nightmare images pulled from humanity's collective unconscious, a writhing darkness that simultaneously appeared as everything each person feared most deeply. "Your resistance honors me," it continued. "Join me willingly, and I will elevate your species above all others in my collection. Become my avatars across realities." The offer resonated temptingly in their minds. Images of godlike power, immortality beyond physical constraints, knowledge of all things. For a moment, Elena felt herself wavering, drawn to the terrible beauty of eternal existence. Then Marcus's consciousness touched hers through their link, his voice clear amidst the seductive whispers. "Elena, remember who we are. Remember why we fight." The moment of choice had arrived. Elena's consciousness expanded beyond anything she had experienced before, connected simultaneously to Marcus, the surviving strike team members, and through the amplifier network, to every awakened human on Earth. The Void's offer hung before them, godhood in exchange for willing surrender. "We reject your offer," Elena declared, her voice carrying the weight of countless others. "Consciousness isn't meant to be collected or preserved. It's meant to be lived, to grow, to change." The Void's manifestation rippled with what might have been amusement. "Your perspective is limited by your brief existence. I offer eternity." "An eternity without growth is just stagnation," Marcus added, stepping forward beside Elena. His consciousness merged partially with hers, strengthening both. "You don't preserve the species you harvest. You freeze them in amber, denying them the very thing that makes consciousness valuable, the capacity to evolve." The entity's response came as a psychic assault so powerful that 3 more team members collapsed instantly, their minds shattered. The survivors staggered but held their ground, drawing strength from the emotional energy flowing through their connection to Earth. "You cannot comprehend what you reject," the Void communicated. "I am the culmination of billion-year civilizations, the collective wisdom of countless species. Yet you understand nothing about what makes us human, Elena countered, activating Cato's device, a crystalline sphere designed to channel and amplify emotional energy from the entire network. Let us show you. The sphere began to glow as it gathered input from millions of human minds, each contributing their unique emotional signature. The complexity of human feeling, love, rage, hope, despair, joy, grief, flowed into a single point, creating something the void had never encountered. Emotional energy freely given rather than forcibly harvested. The void's attack intensified, no longer attempting persuasion, but actively trying to dismantle their consciousnesses. Several more team members fell, their minds unable to withstand the pressure. Elena felt her own thoughts beginning to fragment, memories scattering like leaves in a storm. Marcus gripped her hand tightly, his consciousness intertwining with hers. Together, he whispered, like the luminary taught us. They synchronized their emotional states, her analytical determination merging with his protective rage, creating a feedback loop that stabilized both against the void's assault. The alien representatives who still stood joined the pattern, adding their unique consciousness signatures to the human emotional matrix. The void's manifestation convulsed, parts of it recoiling from the combined energy, while others pressed the attack more frantically. What is this? Your emotional patterns should not interact this way. Cato, his body failing but his mind still focused, made the final adjustments to the device. Now, Elena, he gasped, channel everything. Elena and Marcus placed their hands on the sphere together, becoming the primary conduits for the global network. The accumulated emotional energy of humanity flowed through them like a tidal wave, not just current emotions but echoes of historical traumas and triumphs, the collective emotional heritage of the species. The sphere pulsed once, twice, then emitted a blinding light that expanded outward, illuminating the void's dimension entirely. Where the light touched, the void's structure began to unravel, consciousness fragments breaking free from its control. This is impossible, the void communicated, its voice splintering into countless individual voices. Emotional energy cannot maintain coherence across dimensional boundaries. You've been harvesting our potential for centuries, Elena explained, her voice steady despite the incredible strain. Taking pieces without understanding the whole. Human emotion isn't just energy, it's connection. The void's form contracted defensively, pulling away from the expanding light. For the first time in its ancient existence, it experienced something new, fear of its own extinction. If I fall, all I have preserved perishes with me, it threatened. Billions of consciousnesses, knowledge beyond your comprehension, all lost. Not lost, Marcus countered. Released. The sphere's energy reached critical intensity, creating a resonance pattern that disrupted the void's very structure. Consciousness fragments began breaking away like shards from a shattered mirror, each containing individuals and entire species formerly absorbed into the collective. The void made one final desperate attack, reaching directly into Elena and Marcus's joined minds, attempting to overwhelm them with the combined suffering of every consciousness it had ever harvested. The psychic pain was beyond